In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, thank you, Mr. President. I congratulate Bahrain's presidency for this month. The draft resolution put before the Council was flawed, factually, legally, and politically. The draft is entirely one-sided, biased, and indefensible. It distorts the realities on the ground by falsely attributing responsibility to Iran, the victims of the aggression, while deliberately ignoring the root causes of the current crisis. The text unjustifiably and misleadingly portrays Iran's lawful measures in the Strait of Hormuz, which have been taken in the exercise of its inherent right of self-defense in accordance with the UN Charter, as threats to international peace and security. At the same time, the text seeks to legitimize subsequent unlawful action by the aggressors and their allies under pretext of safeguarding freedom of navigation and maritime safety in the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. Iran's lawful actions cannot be viewed in isolation from the broader context of ongoing aggression against its territory and sovereignty. Attempts to portray them as threat to international peace and security are therefore legally unfounded and devoid of any credibility. Mr. President, the objective of this draft is obvious: to punish the victim for defending its sovereignty and vital national interests in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, while providing political and legal cover for further unlawful acts by the aggressors. Had this draft been adopted, it could have opened the door to dangerously broad and abusive interpretation that could be used to justify further use of force and unlawful actions in clear violation of the UN Charter and international law. It is deeply regrettable that neither Resolution 2817 nor this draft nor the statement of certain Council's members contain any reference to the initiators of the aggressions or the destabilizing conduct in the region, as well as the root causes of the current situation. This clear omission reflects a persistent pattern to politicization and double standards with the Council. Let me be clear, this text would only embolden the United States and the Israeli regime to continue in their unlawful actions and atrocious crime while shielding from accountability. In substance, this was a United States draft introduced under the other names. Today, the President of the United States again resorted to language that is not only deeply irresponsible but profoundly alarming, declaring that, quote, "the whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back," unquote. It is regrettable and alarming that while in full view of international community, the President of the United States shamelessly and brazenly issues threats to destroy all civilian infrastructure in Iran, including bridge, power plants, and energy facilities, by setting a deadline, and openly reveals this intent to commit war crimes and crime against humanity. The penholder of the draft resolution and its supporters have rushed to bring forward such an entirely politicized text for a vote. Its adoption would have set a dangerous precedent, normalizing the use of force based on the vague and unsubstantiated allegation, undermining the integrity of the UN Charter and highlighting the risk of the broader regional and international escalation. For these reasons, we consider the draft legally indefensible, politically unbalanced, and strategically destabilizing. We express our appreciation to China and the Russian Federation for their responsible conduct, for their constructive approach, and for exercising the veto in a manner consistent with the principle of the UN Charter. Their action today prevented the Security Council from being misused to legitimize aggression. In fact, Russia and China ensured the Security Council would not be instrumentalized to legitimize aggression, and in doing so, they stood firmly on the right side of the history. We acknowledge and thank Pakistan and Colombia abstained, recognizing the serious implication that the draft would have had for regional peace and stability. By contrast, those who supported the draft resolution chose to put the blame on Iran while remaining silent on the ongoing war crimes and criminal and the terrorist attack being committed by the United States and Israel against civilians and critical infrastructure in Iran. Their position and their votes today reflect a clear double standard. It exposes a stark gap between their stance commitment to the UN Charter and international humanitarian law and their conduct in practice. Such selective application of legal principles not only undermines their credibility but also calls into question the good faith of the invocation of international law and the UN Charter. Mr. President, we categorically reject all unfounded and politically motivated allegations against my country made in this meeting. These claims lack any legal basis and serve only to divert attention from the realities on the ground, namely the illegal and savage war launched by the United States and the Israeli regime against Iran. Their purpose is clear: to whitewash the atrocious and war crimes committed by the US and the Israel against the people of Iran and to obscure and deflect from serious violation committed against the Iranian people. Having said, Mr. President, I would like to make the following points. First, the Islamic Republic of Iran, as a responsible state committed to the United Nations Charter and the international law, has consistently upheld freedom of navigation and maritime security in the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Gulf of Oman. For decades, the Strait of Hormuz has remained open to all vessels, with freedom of navigation and maritime safety effectively maintained. Currently, the Strait of Hormuz remains open. However, the ongoing unlawful and brutal war waged by the United States and the Israeli regime against Iran has created a dangerous situation that has directly affected maritime safety in the region. In accordance with its inherent right of self-defense, Iran has taken necessary and proportionate measures to prevent aggressors and their supporters from using the Strait of Hormuz for hostile purposes. As a coastal state, Iran has restricted passage for vessels linked to those acts of aggression in accordance with international law. Therefore, vessels associated with the aggressors don't qualify for innocent passage and will be treated in accordance with applicable legal frameworks. Non-hostile vessels not involved in or supporting aggressions may continue safe passage in coordination with relevant authorities in Iran. Responsibility for any disruption or escalation in this vital waterway lies with the United States and Israel, whose actions have undermined regional stability and endangered freedom of navigation. Lasting stability depends on ending aggression and fully respecting Iran's legitimate rights and interests. Second, Iran has consistently pursued to resolve differences through political and diplomatic means, including with parties that have had serious disputes, in order to prevent escalation into conflict. This unjustified and unwarranted war was imposed on Iran by the United States and Israel. In June 2025, Iran was engaged constructively and in good faith in negotiation when it was attacked on the basis of unfounded allegations concerning its peaceful nuclear program. Allegations that were later followed by contradictory claims that such capabilities had already been destroyed. The current aggressions was likewise initiated by the United States and the Israeli regime at the time when Iran, for a second time, was actively engaged in negotiation and an agreement was within reach. Once again, diplomacy was undermined and ultimately betrayed. by the United States. Claims regarding Iran's nuclear program are baseless and unsubstantiated. For over 2 decades, the Israeli regime has repeatedly alleged that Iran is on the verge of developing nuclear weapons. Yet, no credible evidence has been presented to support this assertion. As a committed state party to the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, Iran has consistently rejected nuclear weapons and has clearly condemned the use of all weapons of mass destruction. Iran has also accepted one of the most rigorous verification and inspection regime of the International Atomic Energy Agency, reflecting its stated position that its nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. Yet, within 9 months, 2 wars of aggression have been imposed on Iran by the United States. An NPT depository and Israel a regime outside the NPT. In both cases, Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities were attacked. The Security Council, the IAEA Board of Governors, and the Director General of the agency have failed even to condemn these unlawful acts, let alone prevent the recurrence. This inaction has emboldened the aggressors. US officials now openly speak of targeting nuclear facilities, with the US permanent representative even stating that an attack on the Bushehr nuclear power plant is not off the table. Such reckless threats are a direct consequences of international inaction and have severely undermined credibility of the United Nations and the IAEA. Since the start of this unlawful war on 28 February, multiple attacks have been carried out against Iran's nuclear facilities, including repeated strikes in and around Natanz, Bushehr, Arak, and Ardakan. Particularly alarming are repeated attacks in the vicinity of the active Bushehr nuclear power plant. Any strike on nuclear facilities, notably the Bushehr nuclear power plant, would inevitably lead to irreversible humanitarian and environmental consequences. These unlawful actions constitute clear violation of international law, including Security Council Resolution 487 and relevant IAEA resolution, as well as fundamental principles of international law. However, this council continues to defending silence, and today certain members point finger at Iran. Third, over the past 39 days of this brutal war against Iran, the US-Israeli aggressors have crossed all legal, moral, and humanitarian boundaries, committing grave violation and war crimes. From the outset, they have deliberately and indiscriminately targeted civilian objects, including schools, hospitals, airports, and sport facilities, such as primary schools in Minab. In view of the international community, the United States has slaughtered more than 168 innocent girls' schools in Minab. More than 700 schools and educational centers, along with universities, healthcare facilities, and cultural and historical sites have been attacked, reflecting clear hostility towards Iran's people, identity, and development. They also struck key industrial and production facilities built over decades despite severe sanctions. At the same time, the US officials have made threats to destruction of infrastructure indispensable to the survival of the civilian population. Such threats, including the US President's call for widespread destruction of essential civilian infrastructure, constitute incitement to war crimes and potentially genocide, and must be explicitly condemned under international law. Fourth, from the outset of this unwarranted and savage war on 28 February, the United States utilized military bases and facilities located in countries of the Persian Gulf region. Evidence indicates that military movement and operational Preparation were underway at these bases for the planning, preparation, equipping, and execution of unlawful military attacks against the Islamic Republic of Iran, despite Iran's prior warning that such unlawful action were being planned. Iran has formally reported these developments with supporting documentation to the Security Council and Secretary General. Under international law, states are prohibited from allowing their territory to be used directly or indirectly to cause damage to other states. In addition, they must take all necessary measures to prevent foreign armed forces bases in their territory from committing acts of aggression against other states and must not facilitate or support such acts. In the event of the breach of this fundamental obligation, they bear international legal responsibility. Fifth, Iran welcomes the effort by the Secretary Generals, including the appointment of a personal envoy, to secure an immediate end to dispute Egypt, as well as diplomatic efforts by China and Russia, and support any credible initiative capable of bringing about the sustainable end to this unlawful and unwarranted war. In this regard, Secretary General Personal Envoy is currently en route to Tehran to pursue consultations. Iran categorically rejects a temporary ceasefire, particularly in light of the June experience, when hostilities resumed under false pretext. A ceasefire in this context serve only to rearm and prepare for the continuation of further crimes. Any viable solution must ensure a definitive and irreversible end to the aggression and establish a just and durable peace grounded in credible and verifiable guarantees against any recurrence. The United States and Israeli regime must bear full responsibility for harm and suffering inflicted upon Iranian civilians, objects, and critical infrastructure, and must be held fully accountable. Individual criminal responsibility for serious violation of international humanitarian law, including war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Iran, must be pursued without exception in accordance with international law. The Security Council cannot remain passive. Instead of submitting a one-sided and politically motivated draft resolution, it must act to end this brutal war, demand the immediate and unconditional cessation of US and Israeli attacks, and take decisive measures to ensure accountability for all their violations. Finally, with regards to the United States President's explicit threat of massive war crimes and target and destroys Iran critical civilian infrastructure, this threat constitutes a flagrant and egregious violation of the IHL and the most fundamental rules of governing armed conflict. The United States would bear full and undeniable responsibility for committing a manifest war crimes and a crime against humanity. Iran will not stand idle in the face of such egregious war crimes. It will exercise without hesitation its inherent right of self-defense and will take immediate and proportionate reciprocal measures. The Security Council regrettably has, from the very outset of this war of aggression against my country, failed to uphold its primary responsibilities for the maintenance of international peace and security. That failures does not and cannot deprive Iran of its lawful right to act. Iran's response is firmly grounded in international law. There must be no doubt Iran will take all necessary measures to defend its people, safeguard its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and protect its vital national interests with full resolve. The United States and the Israeli regime will bear responsibility for all subsequent consequences, regional and international. I thank you.